I'm going to start this video with a question. If you see something that you can't explain, would you tell other people what you'd seen, or would you keep it to yourself in case they think you're going crazy? In this video, we look at a couple who see something years ago and then meet back up to try and evidence or explain to other people what they saw. This is Epping Forest, the most haunted forest in England. Hi and welcome to another video. Right, so this one is about Epping Forest, also known as the most haunted forest in England. Now, also has quite a bad reputation of bodies being found in the forest, and you may have heard of Babes in the Wood, which was the unaliving of two children back in 1970. It's also been a place of hitmen, where people have taken out people, and numerous bodies have been found around the woods. And so there's some tragic stories there that I'm not going to say going to link in with these ghost stories that we're going to hear today, but we're mainly going to focus on one event that happened back in 1991, but then is recovered and the people meet back up and they try to explain the events that happened. So in 1991, two young couples, both 18-year-olds, their names was Sarah and James, were dating, and James had just passed his driving test. They lived in Loughton, literally just down the road from where the forest is. Now, Epping Forest runs from North Essex right the way down to basically London, and it's wider in some parts and narrow in some parts. It's broken up with a few towns in between. But essentially it's a very historic ancient woodland. Some of the trees there are rather grotesque, would have been allowed to overgrown. The old beech trees are sort of like massive there. So it's got quite a spooky look about it anyway. James and Sarah had gone out for a date and they'd gone to the King's Oak. Now they'd been there for about an hour, and they sat down and had a drink. And the young couple, they decided they were going to go and walk down to the woods. They've only been dating for a couple of weeks, and they walked out. Now if you go to the King's Oak, you can cross the road and the woods are literally just opposite you. And they walked down there and they walked to where I've got a video here of the big solid oak tree. No, it's not an oak tree actually, it's a big solid beech tree that is grotesque. It's all deformed and overgrown, and it looks a bit strange. It looks creepy. Some people say they can see faces in the tree, but this is where they walked off to, and it's only about a 3-minute walk from the actual pub. So James and Sarah have been around by the tree for about 5 minutes, and James got a little bit spooky. He turned around and said that he felt like somebody was watching them. Sarah turned around and said no, she hopes not, and they stopped and they looked down the footpath. You can see my video where I went there. It does feel creepy when you're there, even in broad daylight. She looked down the slope as it goes down into like the dirt track, and she said she see a shadow, or what she actually turned around and said she thought she see a glowing shape. James didn't believe her. He said, no, you're making up to scare me. And she's no, seriously, look. James, being quite brave actually, he walked further down. And he kept walking, and he turns around and he says to Sarah, no, there's nothing there, come down, we'll walk down here. Now this is a very dark night, and in those forests it gets even darker. And Sarah said that she couldn't see James as he was walking further down. He was disappearing into the shadows, so she didn't want to stand there on her own, so she followed him down to where he was. James kept walking, and Sarah was trying to catch up with him. And she got to about 10 foot away from him, and she heard a sound, and she heard James's name being called, and it was more like a James, James. And this completely freaks her out. One, was it someone there playing a joke? But it was a young female voice that she could hear. And she ran up to James and goes, did you hear that? And James said, I didn't hear nothing. She goes, I just heard someone call your name. And she dragged him by the arm and she goes, I want to go back to the pub. As they're walking back up, the voice come again. James, James. and it's more desperate this time, as if she could see that James was walking away. Sarah turned round and James turned round. They said they see a shape on the pathway that was around about 5 foot tall. They said it was like a misty body standing there, and it was slowly walking towards them. James and Sarah went into a bit of a panic mode and started rushing up the footpath, and again the voice came over, James, James. They turned round, and this time this figure was very, very close to them, and they describe it as a girl in a white dress, soaked, absolutely soaked, short black hair, and with a real pale complexion. There's like a glowing outline to her body that straight away that they knew this wasn't a real person they was looking at. And they, at this point, they got back across the road to the pub and literally sat down. They were both shaking. They looked at each other and said, did we see what we just seen? They said, yes. No, we see this is really happening. After about half an hour and they calmed down, they decided they wanted to leave the pub. Now, their car was at the car park on the side. Now, they had to, at the time, they had to leave the front and walk round. As they left the pub, as James walked out, the girl was standing right in front of the pub. Sarah freaked out, run back in, turned around and said to other people in the pub, oh my God, I've just seen a ghost. They laughed and nothing else was said about it. James and Sarah, quickly as they could, run round to get into the car. Now I'm going to leave that there because I'm now going to skip forward to 2010. As some relationships do, James and Sarah split up, but they met other people and they both went their separate ways and got married. One day James is out with his wife and the kids, and the wife says, I want to go to Epping Forest. James is like, no, not going there. Why don't you want to go there? No, don't want to go there, never going there. And she started pushing him for more information. And he went, no, you'll laugh at me, you'll take the mickey out of me. And she goes, I promise, I won't. Well, that night they got back home and he sat down and she goes, right, I'm ready, tell me. And he told her the story. And she didn't believe him. And he's going, no, honestly, he's going, I was with Sarah and this happened. And she goes, right, so if we ask Sarah, she'd know. And he went, yeah, of course she would. And she goes, well, I want to know. I want to know if you're telling me the truth. She's getting a little bit suspicious. Maybe there's another reason why he won't go back to Epping Forest. And James and Sarah had not spoken since the day they broke up. And she made him contact her on Facebook. Now, they made initial contact and James's wife took over the conversation. And apparently it was quite a good timing. It wasn't long before that Sarah had actually explained to her family why she didn't want to go to Epping Forest. So they actually agreed, bizarre enough, to meet up and have a conversation. And James's wife, still not knowing the whole truth and not being told, and they just said, okay, we'll explain it. And they met up. They chose to meet up at the King's Oak in Epping. And now this was a Sunday lunchtime. They met up there. Introductions, and they sat outside and they told them the story. And obviously James's wife couldn't believe it. Sarah's family were there. They knew, her husband knew the whole story. She'd been through it and told them. And she said, why haven't you ever told anyone this? And I said, because people would think I was crazy. And Sarah said that she'd never told anybody until it came up when her family wanted to go for a day out in Epping Forest. But they also went on and explained the other part of the story that I left out originally. So we left it with them getting to the car in the car park. Now, James, as I said, had just passed his test, and he'd got an old car, and he was trying to start in the car park, and the car wouldn't start. It was like the battery was completely flat. This made Sarah start getting quite angry out of fear, and she was stressing. The more she stressed, the more James was trying to start the car, and it wasn't starting. And he got out and started to push the car. As he started to push the car, Sarah was in the driver's seat, and he had told her and I had to jump start the car with the gears. She looked up as James was pushing the car, and in front of them was the girl, again in the soaking wet dress, standing in front of the car. And as James pushed, the car sort of just went into her, but obviously there was no contact. She sort of just vaporized at the front of the car and completely freaking Sarah out. She just started the car, James jumped in, and they shot off down the road. Now, as they come out of the pub, they turned left and they followed the road going down. Now, if you go there, and you can see, I think I've got a bit on this video, it's wooded on both sides. As I say, you're driving through parts of the forest. I think on one side you've got Wellington Road, and you go down, I don't think it's Wellington Road, you go down the road on the side of it, as if you're heading. I think if you keep going, you end up down at the Robin Hood roundabout. Why there's a roundabout called Robin Hood in Epping Forest, no idea. Shouldn't be Sherwood Forest. There's obviously a joke around it or a reason around it somewhere along the line. I mean, Epping Forest is known for Dick Turpin, which we'll come on to in a minute. But as I was driving down the road, again, pitch black, headlights on, the girl was standing in the road and was walking towards them. They were doing about 30 miles an hour going down that road. James swerved, clipped the side of the dirt bank, and he said it felt like it almost flipped the car, but it burst the tyre on the car. James got out, they had a spare tyre. Sarah was completely freaking. She didn't want to get out of the car, and at this stage she was crying with fear. James jumped out, opened up the boot, got his spare tyre out. All this time, this girl was standing about 20 foot away from the car saying, "James, James." And every time she said this, Sarah would cry more and more and more. And she was literally an emotional wreck in the car with fear. James, again, was panicking. He was trying to jack the car up, and it was one of the old-fashioned jacks, so the ones you get in the back of your car that never seem to work, and you've got to wind it with a tiny bit of metal. The more panic he got, the more mess he was making of changing his wheel. 18-year-olds, back then, I guess we were a little bit more savvy with changing tyres and cars and all that than people do now. So it didn't take him long to do it, but he was trapped there all that time. And all this time while I was there, about 15 minutes, this girl was standing there calling his name. And they describe her in great detail. So, they said her face was pale, but they said she had like these really piercing blue eyes, and her hair was absolutely jet black. And she goes, it wasn't long, but it was like sort of a bit longer than a bob, but it was drenched, absolutely drenched. Everything about her was soaking wet. Finally, James had finished sorting the tyre out, and they got back in the car, and they drove off. And literally drove past the passenger side, drove past this girl standing there. They went away, absolutely petrified, and a few years later they split up, as I say. But they never spoke about it. Never spoke about it again. They said they'd never go back to it. Now, after they met up and they sat in the pub and they spoke with the families, saying all about it, it turned out that Sarah had actually approached a paranormal TV show when she heard they were doing a live show there. And she met a researcher there and told her some of these stories. And it didn't quite fit what they wanted to do on the night and all this sort of stuff. But she said that they mentioned something about that in their TV show. I've looked back on it, I can't find anything mentioned of that. But it's goes back to the question, if you see something, do you tell people? If you hold it in because you think you're going to be crazy, you carry on holding these fears in. And again, I guess this is where these ghost stories come from, and they get shared about, because this isn't the first we've heard of this girl. As it turns out, this girl outside the pub is quite regularly seen, and it tends to be the same sort of sightings of a girl walking up the pathway or the roadway, either saying a name or pointing or trying. People thought they'd been tapped on the back and they turned around and they see this girl standing there. Others felt things thrown at them and they turned around and the girl's standing halfway down there. Now, the story goes, well, I didn't really know the story. I'd heard some bits about it, but when I got there, as I normally do in my research things, I knock on people's doors or talk to locals. And I met the locals there, and they told me the story is that she apparently drowned in a lake down the bottom. And in my video, I drive down to look at this lake, and that's quite far away. So why is this girl walking up? And they said she was drowned in the early Victorian times. So you're going back quite a far way there. There's not much documents on what happened there. Now, it's a royal forest. There's deer hunting and all that sort of years ago. And there's some bizarre stories about the ongoings around there. So it wouldn't surprise me that this child was drowned in the lake. And there's a very similar story of a lake further down, or actually, yeah, it is further down. I think it's about 3-4 miles down, where people are meant to be drawn there into the lake to drown and to end their own lives. And that is meant to be drawn there by a girl who's meant to entice people into the lake. I don't think that's linked with this one. I can't 100% be sure, but the locals told me that this lake down, I don't want to say it's a lake, it's like a pond. It's on the side of the road. You'll see it on here. I think on the left hand side you can go up to the forest road that goes across, and it takes you up to the mounds. And yeah, that day I went there, you couldn't use the forest road, it was shut off. But it is eerie, I say, but it's it's not very big. But this is where the locals told me that this girl's life ended. Now, the other thing the locals told me was that at the bottom of the road, as you keep going, is where the headless horseman is seen, or Dick Turpin is seen. Now, people say it's either Dick Turpin they see riding through the woods, or it's the headless horseman. Now, we have a cartless horse that's meant to go across the top of the Robin's roundabout. So if you follow the road goes right the way down to the Robin's roundabout, there's meant to be a horseless coach or carriage goes across that road. The headless horseman is seen coming up the hill towards High Beach. Now, other people will say that they see Dick Turpin, the ghost of Dick Turpin, coming that way as well. Dick Turpin was executed up north, so I don't know why he'd be down there. But as I say, Dick Turpin did use that forest as one of his haunts and used to hide out down there and stash some of his goods. But one of the strange stories we have for that bit of the headless horseman or Dick Turpin was a wedding couple. Now, they'd just been married and they had horse and cart, and they were riding down there on the horse and cart to go off to their function. So this was in 1982, so they're going down on a horse and cart, and they all say that on the woods on the side of them they see this big black horse with a man clothed in black riding along. Now, obviously Dick Turpin's horse was called Black Bess, and it spooked the horses on the wedding cart. And as they looked across, it was like the horse run into a tree, like it disappeared into the trees. Now, they swear that it wasn't a solid figure, it was something they could partially see through. It was a black horse with this black figure riding the horse. Now, these horses reared up and their shackles come off, and one of the horses was able to escape, and it run into the field on the side. And they said as watching this horse bolt across the field, they could see the shadow or a figure of this black horse with this man on it, riding sort of diagonally towards the horse, and as they met, the horse reared up again and turned around and run back towards where the gentleman was that was using the wedding cart, and he was able to calm the horse down and get it back in. Now, say that was back in the 80s, and there's been other reports of seeing this horse riding down there, and I'd say this is more the Dick Turpin legend, or the ghost of Dick Turpin. Now, the Headless Horseman, I can only find a few reports on that, but it does seem to be around the High Beach area, going across over to the right hand, going down to more the Loughton side, deeper into Loughton. There's more reports up by the Chigwell area, again, of sort of black shapes and lights in the woods. Now, there's the other thing I do hear about, and that is the Hangman's Hill. Now, this is a bit of road where you can park your car and it looks like you're rolling up the hill. Now, people say this is paranormal and all this sort of stuff, and it always goes back to, I think one of the first times I heard this was a place in America, and it was a train track, and people who stopped there said their cars got pushed across and clear of the train track. And the story of this was a bus had broken down on there, a school bus had broken down on it, and it got hit, and some children lost their lives in it. And people who get pushed across there see these children's handprints on the back of the car. As we now know, this is to do with landscape and geography. So although you look like you're rolling uphill, if you sort of pan out, you're actually still riding downhill. So there's a natural explanation to that. But I can tell you now, loads of people still go to that hill and do it at Hangman's Hill. I know that because I went past it, and people do it in reverse, and they're nearly causing accidents down there. So please don't do it. It is dangerous. It's a bit on a bend, and I wondered what was going on, and it weren't until I stopped and asked people while there's all these cars queued up trying to do it that I've really found out that that was where Hangman's Hill was, because it's not really signposted. But Epping's certainly a strange place. Now, I've only covered literally a few ghost stories of Epping Forest. There are literally hundreds of ghost stories from Epping Forest, and it's hard to pick down the ones that I wanted to concentrate on. And it was lucky enough that I bumped into some locals that passed me on information that I could go away and research and talk to people involved in it. That I could pick on the James and Sarah one because it was more intriguing, and I was able to speak to a party that was involved in it, and they've still not been back since. So after they met up with the families and they all spoke, they still won't go back to Epping Forest after that. So it's really left a deep impression on them, and I hope they're watching my channel. I gave them the details of it, and I hope they watch it. Again, thank you for the support in my videos. We're nearly hitting 1,000 subscribers now, which is absolutely fantastic. YouTube asked me to do this membership, so you can join on the membership there. You'll get some exclusive videos and background stuff that I'm doing. Don't have to, you can do super chats. I do plan to go and do some lives on YouTube, so you can follow me live around these places, because it can get a bit lonely doing researching on my own. So I may do some of it on a live feed anyway. But again, if you like it, hit subscribe, share it. Right, that is one thing. Share the video if you enjoy it. Share it to other people you think may like it. The feedback has been brilliant. Now, I really love reading the comments, so more comments you do encourages me to keep making these videos, and I enjoy going out and doing them when I've got the free time to go out and do these videos. So anyway, sorry for the croaky voice, and I'll see you in the next one. Thank you, bye.